Hey everyone, in this video we are going to implement the authentication inside our Next.js application. Okay, so basically the login or register feature. Okay, so any user should be able to log in or register, and once they log in or register, they will be able to add a property, can save properties and all that stuff. Okay, so for that reason we are going to implement the Next.js authentication. Okay, so using Google OAuth. Okay, so we are going to specifically use Google OAuth. If you want, you can also implement login through GitHub or something like that. So to get started, we just need to go to this website called NextAuth.js. Okay, so in this we can just click on get started. So this will give us a set of instructions on how we can implement NextAuth within our Next.js application. Okay, so just to get started, so first step is to install the NextAuth library itself. Okay, using the npm, right? So once we do that, it is going to say that we just need to create a route. Okay, so inside our pages directory, but we are not using pages router, but we are using app router. Okay, so inside that we can just create this route from api/auth/ and then using this wildcard for nextauth.js. Okay, so once we do that, we need to provide some options. Okay, like what are all the providers that we will be using inside our application. So that is we are only going to use Google OAuth. Okay, again we can also use many authentication providers also, like GitHub. So they have given an example on how to use GitHub. So we just need to get the GitHub ID and the GitHub secret. Similarly, if you want to implement Google, so we can just go to this providers right on the left side in our sidebar. So we can just search for the Google provider. Okay, so here it is. So it is going to give us some instructions, like first step is we just need to register our project, our Next.js application on Google console. Okay, so once we register, we will be getting a Google client ID and a client secret. Okay, using those credentials, we will be able to implement the login and register features within our application. Okay, so they have given us some instructions like how we can also use with Google provider. Okay, so they have said that first we need to register our website on Google Cloud. So we can just go directly to this link and it will take you to this console.cloud.google.com page. So basically this is Google Cloud application. So this is one of my previous applications that I built for the property website of this Next.js application. So what I'll just do is I'll just create another account and I'll just get started with that. Okay, and I'll show you how exactly you can just set up your project, your Next.js project in Google Cloud to retrieve the Google client ID and the client secret. So the first step is to create a project on Google Cloud. So what you just need to do is we can click on this drop down on the navigation bar, and over here it will give you a list of projects. Okay, so if you don't have any project, it will be empty. So I have already created one for our project. So if you don't have one, you can just click on this new project and then just give the name of your project and just click on create. Okay, so this will create a project for you of the name that you chosen. So it will be displayed here at the top. So all we need now to do is to create our credentials. Okay, so to get the Google client ID and the secret. So before we do that, we need to register our app, right? So we can just go to the OAuth consent screen, and over there just give all the information of our app. Okay, so let us give the name of our app first. So that is Easy Homes. Just for my reference, I have just marked it as YouTube, and then just give your email ID, and then finally your developer contact information. Again, it's going to be the same. Okay, so and once that's done, we can click on save and continue. Okay, so once that's done, it will take you to the scopes. Okay, so you don't have to do much in this particular section. All you just need to do is save and continue. Okay, again the same, and then it will give you the summary, okay, of all the registered things. So all we just gave is the name of our app and the email. Okay, so all that is that's all it is needed to register our application. So once that's done, we can just go to our credentials and then click on create credentials. Okay, so once you do that, you go to OAuth client ID. Okay, and then select the type of your web application. So that is called as web application. Okay, and then we need to provide the JavaScript origins, which means that which are all the domain names and the port that is allowed for Google Cloud. Okay, because anybody can come in from any route and make a request to Google Auth, right? So we need to also specify the URL from which the user is coming from, right? So let's click on add URI and then specify localhost, okay, because we are right now under development mode, and later once we build our app for production, and we will be getting a domain name, right, once we deploy this on Vercel, and that time we need to come back to this page again and then provide that particular URL, okay. So for now let's give it as localhost. So localhost colon 3000, this is the port where our app is running, okay. So once that's done, we can just go to the authorize redirect URIs, okay. So if you just have a look at the implementation, it says that for this development mode we need to register this particular route, because this is the route from where the user will be coming to make a login, right? So let us copy this entire URL and then go to our Google Cloud and then paste in over here as a redirect URI, okay. So once that's done, we can also we need to create another URI, okay. So that is coming from I'll just show you that auth / Google / callback, okay. So actually this route is also required because in one of the previous application which I was building, so it wasn't working without this. It also told us to register even this redirect URI, okay. So anyways, once that's done, now we can just click on create. So this will go ahead and create a client ID and a client secret, okay. So you see that we have got a client ID and secret. All we need to now do is copy this and paste it within our .env file. We can by creating a variable, okay. So later I'll be deleting this and creating a new one so that it doesn't get leaked, okay. And we can just see what we need to do next, okay. So again, if we go to the get started, we need to create this route, okay, of API / auth, and inside that wildcard for the NextAuth, then .js, okay. So now let's go to the app router or the app directory. So let's create a folder over there for API, okay, and inside that we need to nest another folder for auth, and again inside that wildcard of .next.auth, okay. And finally we just need to define a route.ts or js, okay. Okay, so this is the file where Next.js actually looks for, and we'll try to find in all the options that we provide within our NextAuth, okay. So inside this, let's create a object. So I'll name that as auth options and set this equal to an object, okay. So inside this auth options, we just need 4 different things, okay, to configure our Next.js, to configure our NextAuth, okay. So the first thing is the providers that we need to give within this object. So providers, okay. So for now I'm just going to keep it an empty array, okay. So we need to pass in an array. As I told, we can pass in many providers like GitHub, Google, Apple, or anything like that. So this is done. Then we need the database URL, okay. So this is also required. So if we are using a database, because once we log in, we are storing the credentials within our database, right? So that is why we also need to pass in that. So that is coming from the process.env.database_URL. All right. So then we have the secret, okay. So we need to pass in a secret value for next authentication, and we need to remember this, okay. So whenever we are deploying this application, so it will also take the secret value, and then it will enable the authentication for our project, okay. So let's give the secret and then process.env.nextAuth, okay. So we haven't still created this, so we'll be creating it now. NextAuth_secret. All right. So after this, finally we just need to pass in the callbacks, okay. So callbacks will take in what all the features that we need within our application, okay. So one thing we need is for signing up, okay. So after signing up, we also need to customize the session object so that we can store the ID of the user. So when we create an ID, when we create a user within using our Prisma, okay, within our SQL database, we will get the ID, right? So the ID we are going to assign to the session object, okay. So we are doing inside this callbacks function. So callbacks, and then we just need to pass this an object, okay, where we need to first define a function which is for signing in. Okay, so async, this is going to be an async function, and let's call this sign in. Okay, so and we need to import that from NextAuth/React. Okay, and here we just need to pass in the options, and then after this finally we are going to create another function to modify the session object. Okay, so once this is done, let's go ahead and give the providers. Okay, so this is just the outer view of what we will be providing inside auth options, so that you guys just don't get confused. Okay, so for the providers, we can now refer the documentation and check how to if you are using Google provider, how exactly do we need to use by, of course we need to provide the client ID and secret, but in what format. So when you go back to the documentation for Google provider, so you see that within the providers array, we just need to import the Google provider from provider/Google, and then we just need to pass in the client ID and secret. Okay, so we can just copy this and go back to our code, and we can just paste this here, and let us import the Google provider. Okay, so let's import that. So that is coming from NextAuth/providers/Google. Okay, so once that's done, we just need to pass in the Google client ID and the secret. Okay, so which we have already defined within our environment variables. So the TypeScript is complaining us that this can either be a string or undefined. Okay, so saying that what we can just do is, since we have already defined the environment variable, so there is no mechanism for us to check that if the environment variable is actually present or not, because we are completely detaching that from our project. Okay, since we are not exposing our secret keys and all that. So since we already know that it already exists, so what we can just do is we can just add an exclamation mark saying that TypeScript, don't worry about it, we already have it, and or if not this, you can just pass this as a string like this. Okay, so let's do the same for this as well. Okay, so once that's done, we have provided the Google provider. Okay, and then we have also the database and the secret. So now let's move to the callbacks and then pass in some options to the sign in. Okay, so as far as signing in is concerned, we just need to get the user information. Okay, and then store it into our database. Okay, so if you just refer the documentation, you will get an object called profile. Okay, so this profile will contain all the different user information, like the username, the image of the user, then the email of the user, and all that stuff. Okay, so let's destructure that profile, and then let's assign the type for that. So we are receiving the profile, which is going to contain different properties, like the email, which is a string, and then the name, string, and finally the picture. Okay, so the picture is whatever, when you sign in for a Google account, so by default whatever picture is there, that we are going to use it, or either if you have edited it, that picture will be shown as the URL. Okay, so you will be getting that picture URL, and this is going to be string. Okay, so make sure you type in the exact names like this, and this is the actual values that we will be receiving within this profile. Okay, so once that's done, we now need to connect to a database and then check if the user is already existing. So if the user is already existing, then we just need to sign in the user, else we just want to create a new user and then sign in the user. Okay, I hope that made sense. So let's create a first let's import the database. So import db from @/db, and then we can first check if the user exists. So for that, I'm just going to create a variable called user exists. Okay, so inside the body of this function, and set this equal to await, and also we have marked this function as async because all db operations are asynchronous. So db dot user dot find first. Okay, so first we are finding if the user is existing. Okay, and inside that we just need to provide the where clause inside that. So on what attribute do we want to check? That is on the email, and we just need to pass in the profile.email, right? Profile.email. Okay, so this will check if the user exists. So let's use a if condition. If user doesn't exist, then we want to create a user, right? So let's await db.user.create, Okay, so this is going to take in the data object, and within that we just need to pass in different attributes, okay, to store the user. Okay, so if you remember, we have created the user object. So these are the required attributes, that is the email, username, and the image. Okay, so these are all like optional. Okay, so by default we have given some values, and then we can just go back and use the email and set that to profile.email, and then the name, the username, so the profile.name, and then the image, so that is profile.image. What is it, sorry, profile.picture. Alright, so that's done. We just need to give a comma here and also here. So finally let's return true. Okay, so which means that we are using the sign in to we are allowing user to sign in, okay, by calling this function. So once that's done, so if there's anything error over here, so it will terminate within here itself and it will not return true. Okay, so once that's done, we can move on to the modifying the default session that Next provides us. Okay, so by default it will provide us the email, the username, and the the picture. Okay, so we just need to also add in the ID for that. So we can just go inside this function and destructure the session object itself. Okay, and then defining the type for this, so session, and inside that it will contain a object called user, and this inside this object itself we contain all the different attributes like the email. Okay, so which is a string, and then we have the ID, which is also going to be string. Okay, so this ID we will be defining. Okay, so string, and then the picture. Okay, so alright, so that's done, and now we just need to pass in the what is the maximum age. Okay, so when the session is going to expire. Okay, so we want the session to be expiring after 1 day. Okay, so by default I guess it is around 5 minutes, so we are going to extend that to 1 day. So let us give a max age of, let's say, 86,400 seconds, which makes up 1 day. So max age, and then set this to 86400. Sorry, this max age should come after the session. Alright, so that's done, and now what we can just do is we can just check if the user is already existing first. Okay, so once the user exists, we get the user object itself. Okay, so the user object itself has a property called ID, so that is coming from the MySQL database. So whatever the ID the user it assigns to the user. Okay, and then that user we are going to attach it to the session object. So let's do that. So const, we can call this user and await db.user dot find first. Okay, so there we just need to provide a where clause, and where the email is going to be the coming from the session dot user dot email. Alright, so once we find the user, we are going to take the ID and then store it within the session dot user. Okay, so let's do the session dot user dot id, and then pass in the user dot id, and then dot to string. Okay, so by default it's going to be a number, so we are going to convert that to a string. And yeah, so it says that user is possibly null. Okay, so what we can just do is, we already know that if the user is already there in our database, then we are going to get the ID and then store it within this. Okay, so we can just use a exclamation mark like this, and that will get rid of that error. And once this is done, what we just need to do is, we just need to pass in the entire auth options within our the main function, the NextAuth function, and we just need to export that. So I just forgot to return the session. Alright, so let's now import the NextAuth function and let's export that. So export, we just need to export this in the form of let's call it handler. Okay, and then call the NextAuth function, so that is coming from next-auth/next, and then pass in our auth options like so. Okay, so we are getting some TypeScript errors saying that undefined is not assignable to type. Okay, so any one of these says that may be undefined, so let me just check it out. So I just checked for the issue, but I just somehow couldn't try to figure out like what exactly is the type mismatch that is happening. So I just don't want to waste much of my time. So for now I can just say this as going to be of type any, and then later we are just going to come back and fix this. Okay, so for now, later we can definitely gonna fix this. So once this is done, we have successfully registered next authentication within our project. So what we just need to do is we can just go back to the header.tsx where we have the button to login, right? We can just attach on click handler and then call this function called sign in. Okay, and then we can just sign in the user by providing the ID of the provider, okay, the Google provider. So let us go back to the header component, and here the first step is to store the providers whenever we launch our application. Okay, so what we can just do for that is you make use of the use effect hook, and when we launch the session, then we need to store the providers within our state. And once we store that, when we click on this button to login or register, we just need to call the sign in function, and then this will make the sign in. Okay, so for now let's create a state called as providers and set providers and set this to a state. Alright, and inside this the initial value is going to be null. Okay, so the type is a little bit complex. Okay, I just researched and I just got to know what would actually be the type of this. So I just found out, and then we just need to import these attributes from NextAuth and then use this as a type for providers. Okay, so nothing much, just some TypeScript things, so you can just ignore this. Okay, and just directly import this and this. Okay, so once that's imported, so our type is defined for our providers, and when you hover on this, you see that the type is defined like so. Okay, so once that's done, we can now go ahead and create a use effect. Okay, so within this we can write within this in a function, and we just need to call the get providers. Okay, which is a hook provided from NextAuth, and that will actually give us the providers. Okay, so let us create a function so that we can use async await inside that. So let's call this set providers, set auth providers. Okay, so let's use this within a function which is async. Okay, and then finally call this function. Alright, so once that's done, let's create a response variable and set that to the get providers function, which is coming from NextAuth. Okay, so get providers. Okay, so that is coming from NextAuth/React. Okay, so once we call this, so this will give us the response, and this response we are going to set the providers state with that value. Okay, so once that's done, we just need to pass this as a dependency array, this session. Okay, I'm getting an error here. Yeah, I forgot to use await. Okay, so once that's done, it's now time to check our session object once we log in. Okay, so once we log in, we get the session object, right? So we can just console log and just see that if we are actually getting that or not. So for that, let's call the use session hook from NextAuth. Okay, so that will actually give us the session object. Okay, so let's destructure the session. So you get this in the form of data. Okay, and we can just rename this to session and set this equal to use session, that is coming from NextAuth React. Alright, so once that's done, we can just console log this and see if we are actually getting it. okay, and one after this we just need to pass this as a dependency array, okay, of session. So whenever the session changes, it has to make a request again to the providers and get the refreshed session, okay. So once that's done, we can now go back to our button of login or register. So whenever we click on this, we just need to pass in the particular provider, the ID of the provider, okay. So using this ID, this will go to the Google Auth main page that is already hosted, and there it will give you an interface where you can sign in through your logged in accounts, okay. So let's use the on click and set this to a function. So we need to call the sign in function, okay, so that we actually defined within our route.ts, okay. So let's import that, and now we just need to pass in the provider.id. So inside the sign in function, we can pass in the providers, okay. So providers, since we only have one provider, so we can directly go access the Google provider and then the ID of it, okay. So it says that providers is possibly null. So what we can just do is we can just check if the providers exist, and only then we can render out this button, okay. So if providers, and then if that is true, then we show this button, okay. So that error goes away. So with that done, once we sign in, we do not want to show this button again, okay. So we want to show the image of the Google logged in users image, right? And then we can show a drop down like to view messages or view saved properties or even log out, okay. So a button to log out. So we can just render these buttons conditionally, okay. So if the user is not logged in, we can just show this login button. Otherwise we can show the image icon with a drop down, okay. So first let's check if the session is available, okay. So if the user is not logged in, then the session object will be undefined, okay. So there will be no session. So let's check that if there is no session, and then we can render this out, okay. So if there then if there is session, then we can show the the drop down, okay, with the profile image, okay. So if there is session, then we want to do something, right? So let us import the drop down from Andy, okay, like this. And once we import this, we just need to pass in items, okay, in the form of this menu prop, okay. So this items will be in the form of an array. So we can mention this anywhere at the top. So let's just say items, okay. And then after this, when do you want to trigger this drop down? That is on click, right? So there is a prop called trigger. So we just need to specify an array of options, okay, like when we want to hover or when we want to click, okay. So that is coming from click, okay. So you see that you get some options. So yeah, and let's inside this drop down menu, let's render the image tag from Next.js, okay. So that image, we are going to display the current logged in users profile image, okay. So let's do image, and inside this image, let's use the source attribute, and let's pass in the session user image, okay. So that is coming from session dot user. Let's use optional chaining for dot user dot image, okay, and this is going to be as string. All right, so we have provided the source, and then let's provide some more attributes like the width and the height. So width is going to be 40 pixel and height also 40, and let's give the alt text of user alt. So that is, let's say session dot user dot name, okay. And then finally let's give the class name of profile image, okay. So this class is already defined within our globals.css. You can just check that out. And let's now finally close this image tag, and then finally we are just going to fix some errors, okay. So it says that session.user is possibly undefined. So let's use optional chaining, and for here as well, okay. So it's saying that this can either be null or undefined. So what we can just do is use an OR operator and just say user, okay. So that's done. Let's now specify the items, okay. So later we'll be adding more and more items within this drop down, like saved properties and all that. So let's go at the top and define this variable called items, and inside this we are going to specify a like a drop down. Okay, so one is, for now we are just going to put a drop down of sign out, where the user, after they click, the session will be cleared. Okay, and then the user has to log in again. So here we need to pass in an array of objects. Okay, so where we define the key itself, the key is going to be logout, and then logout. Then we have is the label, not like this, label, which is going to be logout. So this is the label that will be shown as a drop down menu, drop down item, logout. Alright, and then we have is the another prop of danger, which is true. Okay, so whenever we see sign out buttons, usually it will be in the form of danger, right? Danger color, right? So let's say danger and set that to true. Alright, and then finally we have the on click function. Okay, so when we click on this, we want to log out, or we want to clear the session. So on click, and then we need to pass in a function, and we just need to call the sign out. Okay, so that is coming from okay, so maybe I need to manually import this. So sign out. Okay, so that's done. And okay, so we haven't defined the types yet, so that's why so the type of this is going to be actually this has to be equals, and the type of this items is going to be menu props. Okay, so you can also refer the documentation in TypeScript for and design. Okay, so you will get menu props over here, you see over here, and then pass this as an array. Okay, so key doesn't exist, I guess. So inside this array we need to pass in the items. Okay, like this, and now we can just go ahead and assign this. Okay, we already assigned, okay, right? So we have assigned that to items, and yeah, so this will be the drop down for our when we have a session. And after this we are getting some error here, so this should be a comma here. So once that's done, finally one last step is to register to access this session object in various parts of our application. We need to wrap our entire component with the provider of this session. Okay, so let us go to the layout.tsx and then wrap our entire application with the session provider. Okay, so what we could do is we can go to our layout.tsx and we can import the session provider from NextAuth and then wrap our entire application. But since the session provider is a context, okay, it's only limited to React and not on the server, and layout.tsx will only be rendered on the server. So what we can just do is we can create a separate component and pass children into that. Okay, so by this we are only limiting the session provider to be a client component and not the whole application. Okay, so within our components, let's create a file called let's call it auth provider. Okay, and inside this let's do a component and let's import the session provider. Okay, so session provider, and inside this let me just and pass in the children. Okay, so the children we are going to get that as in the form of a props, right? So let's destructure children and assign the type of the children to be react.react node. Okay, so once that's done, we can wrap our entire component with entire application with this auth provider. Okay, so before that I forgot to mark this as use client. Okay, so let's copy this, and we have exported this already, and let's go to our layout.tsx and import this. Okay, so right above the config provider or anywhere inside, so we can just paste in that and we can import that automatically and just pass in everything inside that. Sorry. Alright, so that's done, and now we can go ahead and test this out if we are exactly able to log in or not. Okay, so now we have written a lot of code, so there might be some bugs, so let us hopefully test it out if everything is working. So back into my application, if I refresh, for some reason I don't even see the button being rendered here. Okay, so maybe there should be some issue. Like, let's check the console. I don't see any specific error being displayed. Let's check the terminal, and so we get an error here saying that we need to export the route handlers as HTTP methods. Okay, so I think I missed that. I thought it was not necessary, but it is actually needed. Okay, so within this handler we can just export this as get or post. Okay, so that's how this API routes works under this app when we are using the app router. Okay, so let's export this manually one by one, like export handler as get. Okay, and again same handler as post as well. Okay, so we are just giving some export alias like this, and by this hopefully it should work. Okay, so let's check. Let's go back and just try to check. If I refresh, I still don't see that. Maybe that was not the issue. So anyways, that warning was gone within our terminal. Okay, so it says that each child in a list should have a unique key prop. I am not sure where is that coming from, so let's just check that out later. And if I just check my console once again, there's no specific information about the error, so let me just check. So I just forgot to call the set auth providers function itself. This is my natural habit that I keep forgetting things when I'm typing. Okay, so sorry about that. So once this is done, if I save the file and go back to my application, I should be able to see the login button. Okay, so there we have the login button. Okay, so when I click on this login button, it should shows an interface where we yeah, there we go. So we see all the different Google accounts that you have registered. Okay, so I'm just going to click on one of the account and just try to sign in. Okay, so I'm just going to sign in through my email ID and click on continue. Okay, yeah, there we go. If I click on this, I should be able to see the drop down, okay, where I can log out. Okay, so before that, I just wanted to show you the session object which I had console logged. Okay, so you see that we get an object of you see when it expires. So it is 1 day, since I set the time of 1 day, right? That is 8600 milliseconds. So it is going to expire after that, and this is the user object that I actually get, okay, along with my email ID which I logged in, and then the default ID. Okay, so this is the ID when I signed in, which will be registered within my MySQL database, right? So that is the ID, and then this is the image URL which is actually being displayed over here, and then this is the name, okay, my actual name. So this is all about it. Okay, so now one more thing is I forgot to mention. So if you go to our types the next config.mjs, so you just need to register this. So you see that this is coming from a remote location. Okay, so that is googleusercontent.com, and we just need to go to our next.config.js and then specify the host name of that. Okay, so this is the remote patterns where Next.js image will allow only these images that to be accessed from these remote locations and not from any other locations. So we have already done that for Cloudinary when we are setting up the database, and also we had to specify the HTTPS and host name, and then the path name. Okay, so which is coming anything after this domain name. Okay, so this is all about it. So if in case if it is not working, so make sure you have this registered within your next config.js. Okay, so once that's done, let me just show you the database. How is the user exactly, is it actually registered or created an instance within our database or not? So now if I log in through my MySQL workbench, so and access the user table, you see that this is the ID which I just showed you, which is 10, and the email and the username is all been registered within our database. Okay, and also we get the default created at and updated at timestamp. Okay, so this is the by default, and yeah, so this is all about this Next.js authentication using NextAuth. Okay, so I hope you like this video, and if there's anything, please let me know. If you have any issues or while creating the next authentication inside our Next.js project. Okay, so if there's anything, please let me know. And is there anything else did I miss? And also let's try to log out, okay, by clicking on this logout button from our drop down. And once I click that, yeah, there we go. So we do not have the session, so that's why it's showing us the login button. Okay, so again, if I try to log in, I should be able to see the logo again. Okay, so that's it. I just wanted to show you that. So I guess we are done for the video. So if you come till here, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.